So awesome. So, hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the first of our 2023 webinars. So, these masterclasses are designed to help broaden your horizons, share a little bit more insight into areas that are important, and we're going to be bringing a whole load more this year. So just before we make a start, we've got lots of exciting announcements and lots happening this year. We've got a new text app coming through. We are relaunching a new revamped business model and very exciting times. But before we get too carried away with Tutor Hive, what we are very lucky to have is Martina, who's going to be sharing the third webinar from her sort of new venture on Let's Make AD History. And what we're going to be talking about is detoxing your brain. So 2023, new year, new me, new hopes, new dreams. And what we find is actually we very quickly break those resolutions, and there's some resolutions that should be kept. And so Martina's going to be sharing how we can maybe claw back some of the damage we might have done by breaking those New Year's resolutions in very quickly. So yeah, Martina, over to you. Thank you so much for joining us and looking forward to this.
Thank you for having me. Rishabh, would you like to go through your intro, or shall I jump right into my slides?
We can do a very quick one. So what we're aiming to do is connect everyone in the educational ecosystem and make it accessible. We're here to, make an impact and change and make education something that everyone can afford, works for them, not just those who have the advantage, those who are disadvantaged. And we want to use innovation and our platform to drive personal development and growth across everyone. So that's where we are, what we're trying to do. Go to the next slide. And what it is that we do is we're a tuition hub. We connect students and passionate driven experts to make that whole field of non-academic and academic subjects accessible, instant, and enjoyable. So we can skip over this. We talk a lot about what we do, and but it's more important that we start to talk about how we can look after our brains. So Martina, over to you.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the third webinar of my series. As Rishabh just said, it's very much about detoxing our brains. Just a tiny bit about me, and really my passion is very much brain health, and due to my personal experience, and I studied functional medicine very much with the focus on optimizing brain function and really preventing brain disease, because that, of course, is definitely something that we want to do in order to not lose ourselves. So with that, I'll just jump right in. So the structure of this webinar will be, on the one hand, a high-level overview of what Alzheimer's is and its risk factors, and then very much connecting that to our daily lives, to the symptoms of toxicity that you may recognize in yourselves, the toxic exposures that we specifically have in our lives, some obvious, some hidden. And this webinar is very much about understanding where toxins are, where they're coming from, and with a view to being able to avoid them, or if we cannot avoid them, to really support our inherent detox mechanisms in detoxifying our body from these substances. Then I will go high level through the detox organs of the body, and how we can actually avoid retoxifying ourselves. And the last point is really that I'll just give you a quick overview of my project, Let's Make AD History. So let's make Alzheimer's disease history. So very much focus on prevention of brain disease. And I think any questions you may have, please type them into the Q&A function, and I will respond or go through them then at the end. Okay, so a quick overview of the Alzheimer's risk factors. So here on the left-hand side in the green field, you'll see how incredibly multifactorial this illness is, and it's not even one illness. It has so many different triggers, risk factors, but also 5 different disease progressions, if you will. But everything with Alzheimer's ends up with 2 biomarkers that Alzheimer's patient has in the brain. That is amyloid beta and tau. These are the two expressions that you may have heard in the context of Alzheimer's. And I'm really trying with this webinar to contextualize words that you may have heard here and there, just to put them into context, into a structure. So amyloid beta and tau are the two biomarkers that we definitely want to prevent. And with food and lifestyle and detoxification and all this that we're talking about here. So on the left-hand side, you'll see genetics, non-genetics, environmental, aging, so various aspects. Here we, in this webinar, very specifically talk about toxins that we're exposed to, and of course, toxins that the brain is exposed to are the same ones that the body is exposed to. So the detoxification is very much a whole body system exercise, if you will, that if we have toxins anywhere in the body, we want to make sure that they can be mobilized and excreted. That is really the goal of or the process of detoxification. Here on the right-hand side, you see the environmental toxins that are specifically problematic in Alzheimer's. Is definitely not an exhaustive list, but a high level. So on the one hand, you see the heavy metals: lead, mercury, arsenic, cadmium. Aluminium is not a heavy metal, but of course a metal as well. And pesticides and nanoparticles are two other categories of toxins that are highly problematic for the brain. Pesticides, herbicides and pesticides, so essentially chemicals that are being sprayed onto our fruit and vegetables, but also our environment, and that we breathe in, and that or that reaches our body through ingesting these fruit and vegetable, or by touching surfaces that have been treated. And nanoparticles that can really be anything from minuscule plastic components that end up in our food supply, or any micro dust that we breathe in. I don't know, going on the London Tube is probably one of those exercises. So really the environmental toxins that surround us, and they all have a potentially detrimental effect on the brain. And here we're learning how to get rid of them. So high-level Alzheimer's, as I said, it's a multifactorial disease in terms of risk factors, but also in terms of it's not one disease, it's very high-level 5 diseases. That here in the circle, it looks like one is causing the other. The connection is probably not one-to-one, but multi-factorial. High level, it's the inflammatory effects of us ingesting inflammatory foods, inflaming the gut, and with that inflaming the brain. Atrophic, meaning we don't have enough nutrients or enzymes or coenzymes or whatever it is that the body needs to function well, the brain needs to function well. The third type, glycotoxic, so that is in the context of glucose balance or imbalance, diabetes 2, and the precursor insulin resistance that may up in the brain as diabetes 3. Fourth one, traumatic. So that is a situation where a patient has received one or several extreme or severe knocks to the head, so concussions, that can happen in car accidents, but also in contact sports. So that's something to keep in mind. But here in this webinar today, we focus on the toxic type, the toxic risk factors, and how we can get rid of them. So to tie it all in with our daily lives, probably you've been wondering if this is relevant to you, if you are exposed to toxins because you don't live or work in a coal mine. But so if we go through our daily lives, and here I'm just listing the beginning of a day, if you will, just to highlight. And that really, there can be toxins in all these things, in the air we breathe, in the water we brush our teeth or shower with, the personal products we use, personal beauty products, personal care, detergents, whatever it is, the clothes we wear, meaning the fabric dye may be toxic, the coffee we drink. With coffee, there are lots of positives for the brain from coffee, but in this toxic context, coffee may have a load of mycotoxins, which are toxins from mold, if the coffee hasn't been stored correctly. The food we eat, obviously, that may be pesticides, herbicides, or if it is fish that has lived in the ocean for a long time, like tuna, that is problematic because of mercury. And the things we touch, and that is something getting a bit more on the unexpected, towards the unexpected side of things. For example, till receipts, old school till receipts, can be toxic literally to the touch, and anything we touch can get into our bloodstream through the pores of our skin. On the right-hand side here, nice little overview. Meet the neurotoxins, which sounds so fun. It's not necessarily. The fluoride in conventional toothpaste is a huge problem, which has now been added to our water supply, which is based on some misinterpreted, misunderstood clinical trial from a long time ago. Fluoride is actually a neurotoxin and is actually not in any way supportive for dental health. Something to keep in mind. Here we have the sushi, so that refers to tuna, mercury, or any aged fish. I'm sure there's swordfish tuna or shark tuna sushi as well. So that really refers to mercury. Alcohol is of course a neurotoxin, and yeah, so that's really just to make it a little bit more concrete and tangible for you where toxins in your life may actually come from. The symptoms of toxin buildup. So buildup in the sense that our body is exposed to so much toxins that our natural detoxification mechanisms just cannot keep up anymore, and we're starting to carry this heavy burden of toxicity, and that may show up in symptoms such as brain fog and headaches. Very likely, if you've been exposed to a place where there were, you may even be able to detect it, smelling it, exposed to fumes, car fumes, but also paint fumes, that you will find you have starting to get a headache, brain fog. That may be transient, so just short term, but it may be permanent. Vision impairments, something that is very present or very, very common by now. Depression, disordered moods, irritability, anxiety. That might be another indicator of high toxicity and toxic load. Fatigue, so complete lack of energy. Also unexplained weight gain or weight loss and nausea, so very much the gut being affected. Brittle hair, brittle nails, hair loss. That is a strong indication of toxicity. And if we think about cancer patients that have been exposed to chemotherapy, they're of course, with their hair loss, are showing extreme signs of toxicity. That is, of course, the extreme end and the more controlled end of it, but still it's severe toxicity. And something that I think is very easily underestimated, bad odor, bad breath, or a bad body odor, may be another indication of the body being just overloaded with toxins. Especially people who are having just an unpleasant smell to their skin, that might be very indicative of some permanent toxic load that hasn't been shifted, that really requires the detox mechanisms, detox organs to be supported. So we in many instances, I think, are very clear on when we're doing certain things that we're exposing ourselves to toxins. And that, of course, is alcohol, smoking, processed foods because they taste nice or they're so convenient, takeaway convenience foods, highly processed, and just always available. We're hungry. High sugar foods, high sugar drinks. That is, again, a treat, short-term treat, but still is something that our body even craves because our body has this inherent need for sugar, very much due to some evolutionary reason, where our ancestors lived in a world where if there was sugar, they needed to load up on it because that meant energy. But of course, now we live in this high caloric world where we're just constantly exposed to high sugar. Another important thing that may or may not be so clear to everyone is OTC medications, so over-the-counter medications, paracetamol, ibuprofen, aspirin, whatever it is. These are highly toxic to our liver, to various other aspects of our body. So to keep that in mind, people are very often just told to take paracetamol if they have something minor. I would always argue, think twice, because that will put a lot of stress on your body that very likely might be solved with a lot of water and some nutritious fruit and some blueberries. Obviously not everything can be solved with blueberries, but many things can. So while we sometimes know what we're doing, sometimes we just don't. So the hidden toxins that are really the ones where we don't know what's happening, where we don't realize that we're increasing our toxic load, and with that increasing the stress on our detox organs. First of all, in food and water, we're exposed to pesticides, artificial sweetness. Aspartame is one of the artificial sweetness that is really ubiquitous in any diet soda, that has been shown many, many decades ago to be destructive for the hippocampus. So, but for some reason it's still allowed. So it's something to very much keep in mind. MSG, so that's monosodium glutamate, and that is a taste enhancer essentially that is used very often in Chinese food. It's the taste enhancer that makes things very umami, very savory, and that is eaten in larger amounts a neurotoxin or behaves like a neurotoxin. There is even in the medical community, there's this expression, the Chinese restaurant syndrome, and that is people that have eaten a lot of Chinese food, leave the restaurant and feel have headaches, feel dehydrated, feel foggy, and nauseous, dizzy. So that is really clearly signs of neurotoxicity. And of course, mold in food. I mean, mold that is visible in food is safe in the sense that we see it, we're not going to eat it, we throw it away. But mold that is not visible, and that is really with food that has been stored inappropriately, and that comes back to coffee, that is really a hidden problem. So it's always a good idea to go for higher quality raw foods that have been stored correctly, and where there won't be hidden problems like mold or pesticides if it's non-organic food. In water, but not just in water, heavy metals are a problem, as mentioned in older fish, and in foods, as I said, like older fish, but also, I mean, people with old school dental fillings, amalgam fillings, that is obviously not food or water, but another source of heavy metals, and fluoride. And fluoride is probably something that is severely misunderstood, as it is always added or in toothpaste, conventional toothpaste. Fluoride is a neurotoxin, and it does not support dental health. So it makes absolute sense to have a toothpaste that does not include fluoride, and to have a water filter that actually filters out fluoride or any other substance. So that is really the food and water, very high level. In our homes, we are very much exposed to a number of toxins that are very easily preventable. In the context of food preparation, cooking pots and pans that have this non-stick coating are highly problematic, in that this material that is used to coat the pans to make them more easily cleaned is when heated, it gives off particles that act as neurotoxins. So all these things in the kitchen that, when heated up, will liberate elements that end up in our food that we don't need, definitely don't want. Aluminium foil, same thing. Aluminium is a metal that is indicative in the Alzheimer's process. So we want to ideally cover our foods or store our foods in glass containers or porcelain, or something that does not have any, will not give off any particles that end up in our foods. Same with plastic, especially heating food in plastic containers in a microwave, for example, is highly problematic. I would say a microwave in itself is not a good idea, but that's for a whole other webinar. The cleaning products and detergents at home, if they're conventional products, they will contain a very high level of chemicals, substances that the body simply doesn't know what to do with, and they may likely be stored in the body. And while we simply, by us touching surfaces, by us breathing in whatever has been sprayed, so we definitely don't want them in our bodies. With cleaning products specifically, I would say there are two issues. On the one hand, those sprays that are antibacterial, that kill all bacteria, that kill everything, they may kill pathogens, but they will also kill many of the commensal bacteria in our microbiome, in our gut. And the community in our gut is an incredibly important part of our physiology. So we definitely don't want to clean those guys, kill those guys. And the other problem with cleaning products is, of course, chemicals, bleach, whatever it is. You can smell it, this is not good. This is not something that the body likes. And laundry detergents, and there the issue is really that if we wear clothes that have been washed with detergent, that is on our skin all day for many hours, and that will seep into our bloodstream through our pores. So whatever you have on your skin, you have in your body. So that's something to keep in mind. And the same really applies to personal products, personal beauty products, anything that we apply to our skin will end up in our bloodstream. So there's a saying that you only want to apply things to your skin that you would eat and digest as well. So that's something to keep in mind. And of course, so many things like nail polish, or where you know where to smell. This is some horrific stuff. So that is something to keep in mind, and can be in many cases avoided. The clothing dyes, similar concept or mechanism to the laundry detergents, is toxicity in clothes that will seep into our bloodstream simply because we have it on our skin. Another thing in the home is really the fabrics that are used in the home. Sofas very often are treated with fire retardant, which seeps, or essentially fumes from that material that the fabric has been sprayed with, will remain in the air. We'll breathe that in. Paint, old school paints very often contained lead. Again, that's something that we breathe in. Old pipes, copper, lead. Again, that is something that will be in the tap water that we drink or shower with. And mold, so that's really the mold behind cupboards or in places that we don't really see, the dark corners. And that is highly problematic in the context of Alzheimer's, simply because of the toxins that mold produces. It's called mycotoxins, and that is something that we definitely want to avoid. So if you see any patch of mold anywhere, make sure to completely clean that, or have that professionally cleaned to make sure that doesn't come back. A small side note here, sports. So any sport that is placed on lawn, on very manicured lawn, and golf is the classic example. The lawn will have been treated with some very efficient pesticide or herbicide, and that will be incredibly drastic for the human microbiome. And just as a side note, really, I thought that was a very interesting thing. I read about the high incidence of Parkinson's in people that play a lot of golf or golf course keepers. So I think the piece that I read, that was very much more correlation than causality, but that article was a few years old, so possibly by now the causality is clearer. In any case, I would say anything that looks unnaturally perfect will have an unnatural reason behind it that our body may not be able to deal with so well. Right. Oops, sorry. So now, moving on to our detox organs. So what we actually have in our body that is made to detoxify us from all the things that I've just talked about that we are exposed to consciously or unwittingly. So our body really has 5 detox pathways. So on the one hand, the organs, liver and kidney. The skin, very much the ability to sweat out toxins through our pores. Our guts, that's of course a place where we excrete any food that we have ingested, and the gut will then excrete the waste products of that. The 4th detox system is really the lymphatic system. So that is the liquid, the transparent liquid, the fluid that we have under our skin, and that is separate from the bloodstream, from the vascular system. But and the lymphatic system is very much a waste disposal system, if you will. And here I'm mentioning the glymphatic system. That is very specifically the lymphatic system we have in our central nervous system in our brain, and it has the same job as the lymphatic system for our body. The glymphatic system is really the waste disposal system of the brain. The last one is really the respiratory system, so that we excrete waste with breathing out. And here in that little visual, you can see where things are. So we have a number of tools to support the detox pathways, to support our detox organs. That is, on the one hand, nutrition, herbs and supplements. Supplements, just really for context, seems to, for many people, to be like a completely separate category. Supplements are really mainly certain elements of the foods we eat, but they're isolated in much higher doses than we could ever eat as food. And of course, herbs are herbs. Another tool is exercise and sauna. So that comes back to supporting the skin in its ability to excrete toxins through its pores. Sleep and meditation, that is very much the tool to support the glymphatic system, the brain. And of course, a very important factor is avoiding retoxification, if you will. And I think we've now learned quite a bit about where toxins are, where they may be lurking, where we didn't really know. So avoiding them in the first place is, of course, a great strategy to have. Right, so now I'm going into a bit more detail. This webinar is recorded, so you don't have to take notes now, but you can check back later. I'm structuring it here again in the 5 ways, as we've talked about before, the 5 detox organs of the body. The foods to support liver and kidney are very much the famous dark green leafy vegetables that are good for anything and everything in our body. For detoxification, very specifically, leek vegetables, garlic, onion, leeks are a very good thing. Bitter vegetables are supporting liver, kidneys, and the gallbladder, which is of course part of this detoxification organism. berries, good for anything and everything, and of course fat. So high quality fat, omega-3, omega-6, so that's fish oil, but also extra virgin olive oil are incredibly supportive for the detox process. And the nutrients to support liver and kidney are very much nutrients that are supportive of any aspect of the body. So the body is one system. Obviously, if something is good for one aspect, it will be very, very likely be good to other aspects, good for other aspects as well. So some minerals, zinc, selenium, magnesium, very important. I'm mentioning here milk thistle, and that is a herb that you may have heard about before. It is something that has been around for generations. It is just a shrub herb. And the interesting thing with that is I've been a huge fan now for a long, long time, that it is incredibly supportive in the metabolism of alcohol. So if you are planning to drink alcohol or you have had alcohol, milk thistle as tablets, not as liquid, because the liquid is not nice, but as tablets is incredibly helpful. You can chat with any sommelier and ask them how they deal with the daily alcohol exposure, and very, very likely they will have milk thistle with them. So just as a side note, the other items here, NAC, ALA. So NAC is an N-acetylcysteine, that is a sulfuric compound that comes back to the sulfur that in a raw food, like garlic and onion, is supportive. ALA is a precursor to a glutathione, which is the detoxification agent, very important for the liver. And resveratrol, you may have heard about from red wines, in red grapes, dark berries, blueberries, is a very very potent antioxidant, and probiotics, which of course is supporting anything and everything in our body, but also liver and kidneys. And another side note here on alcohol intake, not sure what that says about me, but you may have heard about activated charcoal as something that people take with them in their little emergency pharmacy when they travel to exotic locations, in case they eat foods that are foreign to their body, and so they will have strong reaction to that. Activated charcoal really just due to its molecular structure, or it is structural, it will attract any kind of molecule that will then mobilize it for excretion. So activated charcoal is the very, very, very basic version, but a very efficient version of detoxifying. The second detox organ is really skin. So it's all about sweating, sauna, exercise, to really push out the toxins that are in our bloodstream, in our system. The third point is regular excretion is incredibly important. Excretion of waste products. So foods we eat are of course partially macronutrients, partially micronutrients, and partially indigestible fiber, indigestible items, and that is really the waste that we need to excrete to make sure that that doesn't stay in our body or even in our guts, and that is not a place where anything should stay. To support that, high fiber intake is very helpful, and fermented foods to support the microbiome. Fermented foods, that is really yogurt, kefir, but also kimchi, sauerkraut for the more adventurous connoisseurs. The fourth detox organ or system is really the lymphatic system, and to optimize that, it's really all about keeping the lymphatic fluid moving, and you do that with exercise, so very much running, jumping, so anything that really mobilizes your body, gets your lymphatic fluids moving. Lymphatic drainage for people that cannot necessarily do that sort of workout. And that is really a very specific massage that gets the fluids moving. And dry brushing, that is really the home version of lymphatic drainage massage. That is with this brush. You may have seen that with that you can move the lymphatic fluid towards the lymph nodes, which is usually in the joints, where they are mobilized where the toxins are collected and then mobilized for excretion. And the last point, really, this respiratory system, it's all about breathing correctly, deep enough, consistently. And I think it is very important to keep in mind that nose breathing is almost always preferential. I think mouth breathing, I cannot necessarily tell you about athlete breathing, but regular breathing should be ideally always nose breathing to really ensure that any toxins that you have been breathing in can be exhaled. With nose breathing, you ensure the position of the tongue to be at the roof of the mouth, meaning that the tongue does not fall back and block the airways, and with that block the exhale process. And as a side note, that is what happens in snoring. People that feel their nose is obstructed, so they breathe through their mouth, and if the mouth is open, the tongue will not rest quietly and happily on the roof of the mouth, but the tongue will fall back and obstruct the airways. So very important, focus on nose breathing. Right, so somehow my buttons, things are a bit funny. So as mentioned before, I mentioned the lymphatic system and the glymphatic system. So just to give you a high level idea of what that actually is, it's quite a new concept. It was only really started to be talked about or written about from 2013. So it is essentially the extension of the lymphatic system, but the very specifically lymphatic system in the brain, and the glymphatic system, and it is the waste clearance system. That's really what it is. The lymphatic system does that for the body. The glymphatic system does that for the brain. And here in the visual, you can see how the glymphatic system is, of course, connected to the lymphatic system, but also to the digestive tract, to the circulatory system. So that is really just to give you a high level idea of what the glymphatic system is, just so that you've heard it. And really the toxins for the brain, I think that is very consistent with the, probably on the second slide you saw, the toxins that are problematic in the Alzheimer's context. So it's really in the brain, the heavy metals, the mycotoxins, so from mold, nanoparticles that we breathe in, neurotoxins, fluoride, alcohol, and the glycotoxicity, while that is something that is a bit more involved process, if you will, but high level, it is a toxicity that we want to avoid from ever reaching our brain. So that is, yeah, the very, very high level view of the glymphatic system for you here. So the best way for us to support our glymphatic system to help it really detox the brain is sleep. So really the process of deep sleep, sufficient sleep, that is really the best way to detox the brain and to really give the glymphatic system the chance to remove waste products from our brain. There are a number of foods and nutrients that we can also ensure to have sufficient amounts of, but sleep is can never be replaced with anything really. But we can also support our the nutrient system with seaweed, kale, watercress, various fatty foods, nuts, seeds, but also fish, extra virgin olive oil. So it's the usual suspects that you've heard before. Very important with the brain is always to stay hydrated. So the cause of most headaches is simply dehydration. So that is a very simple habit to have, to, if you forget to drink because you don't actually get thirsty, to have really a rule to drink a glass of water every hour or even more water rather than anything else. Because of course, if we drink a fizzy drink and aspartame, that kind of defies the purpose a little bit. So that's for the foods. On the nutrient side of things, you may have now heard of all of these before. Magnesium, manganese, iodine, selenium and zinc are incredibly important to keep a brain healthy, to keep it strong, to support detoxification. Vitamin D3, K2, probably more important on the strength, the resistance, the resilience of neurology. But in any case, in order to support detoxification, we want to support sufficient nutrients. And algae like chlorella and spirulina, you may have heard about those in smoothies and stuff. They're actually highly efficacious as detox nutrients. So that is definitely something to consider. Don't taste great, just so that you know. And again, NAC and ALA, so that I think I mentioned in the context of foods to support or nutrients to support liver and kidney. And that is here as well, because we're all one system. So the last tool to really support our low toxin life, if you will, is really to avoid retoxification. And that is really a matter of knowing where toxins are and knowing how to, with what to replace them, in order to not live a life where we just constantly deny ourselves everything and then get to a point where we just, don't care anymore. So I think that is very important to know what to replace and what to replace it with, in order to still have something tasty, a treat in our lives, that so it doesn't feel like your whole life's just cardboard because you want to keep your toxins low. So to eat organic, unprocessed foods, and ideally drink only filtered water. That is very important. I think very often you can tell with tap water, once you switch it on, there might be a whiff of chlorine or something that is not pure spring water, happy blue sky mountains. But with that, you already know, ideally, that should not be there. Stopping to smoke, reducing alcohol intake, quite an obvious one. Or, well, I'm not sure if there's any detox that can be done with smoking other than to just stop. But of course, with alcohol intake, I talked about milk thistle and activated charcoal as emergency measures to really avoid adding liver stress from alcohol. To replace the conventional kitchen utensils that I talked about before, to avoid really this constant stream of particles that are liberated from pans, from aluminum foil, from plastics, whatever it is that ends up in our food supply. Avoid non-organic cleaning products. By now, there are quite a few companies that do very efficacious cleaning products that are organic cleaning products, and that I think is definitely worth the slightly higher investment, not an investment, slightly higher price. But that really makes your home a much safer place. After all, you're spending most of your time at home. The non-organic cosmetics and personal products, again, can be quite easily by now replaced with just natural products. Here, I think it's definitely something to read ingredients, because so many beauty products, personal products are being marketed as kind to skin, natural, and this and that. Just read on the ingredients if that's just marketing or if that is actually the case. Avoid medications, NSAIDs, where possible. So NSAID is non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, and that is the whole category for paracetamol, ibuprofen, aspirin, all these very handy over-the-counter painkillers that we just so easily take. I would say a life without NSAIDs is very possible. I've done this now for a long time, and you don't need them. So it's very much breaking the habit of reaching for these things right away, and actually considering what is actually the problem, what is the underlying problem of my headache, of my whatever it is, and to not reach for those medications right away. Antibiotics is another problem in the sense that, of course, in some cases, there are pathogens in the body that cannot be removed other than with antibiotics, but to keep in mind to replenish your microbiome with very high dose probiotics. Very important, because the microbiome that gets affected so badly by antibiotics has to be happy and healthy and very varied in order to support us, the whole body, and of course the gut-brain axis, that is really the axis between the microbiome and the brain. So we want to keep that as happy as possible. Avoid pesticide use in the garden where you can. I think well, I'm not a gardener, but I would really suggest to everyone to consider if there are any organic biological options to keep the garden tidy and not to spray it with glyphosate or whatever it might be. Another thing is mold in the house. Avoid toxic exposure to mycotoxins from mold by making sure that there are no dark corners where dampness is fostering mold, and with that you breathing in mycotoxins in your own place all the time. And very important, watch your nutrient intake, as mentioned on the slide before, really just to make sure that your body has all the fuel it needs to really optimize the function of your detox organs mechanisms. Right, so that brings us to the end of the brain detox webinar. And just a really quick word about my project. Project name, Let's Make AD History. So let's make Alzheimer's disease history, as in let's make sure that doesn't happen anymore. And we can just look back and say, well, do you remember when that was a problem? So I'm just dreaming here. And so the project will be an algorithmic tool that will give the user a tailored guidance on food and lifestyle choices to make in order to prevent Alzheimer's or lower their Alzheimer's risk in the future. And this tailored guidance is really based on the user profile. So that is why it will be run by a large algorithm. So with that, I think we have come to the end of the presentation. Let me have a look if there are any questions. Okay, so the first question here from Anna. What would you recommend as alternative to using fluoride toothpaste? Well, there are by now a number of toothpastes that are fluoride free. You can get them at any drugstore and Boots, and there are several toothpastes that are on the basis of activated charcoal. So it's a black toothpaste. It will make your towels look like you work in a coal mine, but it's amazing for teeth, and that is just activated charcoal and peppermint oil, and it is incredibly cleansing for the teeth, and with that you don't expose yourself to fluoride. So that would be my recommendation for that. toothpaste. Yes, so I think Naveed, for toothpaste, I would go with fluoride free. And sushi, the one thing I would avoid with sushi is tuna. That, I mean, everything else is absolutely fine, even though some people have, depending on which sushi place you go to, the farmed salmon from Norway has a very bad reputation in terms of them being fed absurd things. So if you want to go into detail, you could always ask the sushi store where they get their salmon from. If you avoid tuna, I think you're quite safe. So that's probably what I would say there. And what, Bobby, what do you think about vaping instead of smoking? Well, I think for brain health, vaping is probably a lot better because the risk from smoking for the brain is really cadmium, and that is a consequence of burning. So, and there's no burning in vaping, if I understand that correctly. So I think it may be better for the brain to vape. I've heard people having concern about vaping that maybe, I'm trying to think what that was. I don't know enough about that. But yeah, so if you can avoid cadmium in the brain, it's the way forward. So with that, I don't want to endorse anything, but if you can avoid smoking, that's a good thing. Can you recommend a clean coffee brand without the mold? Well, I cannot really recommend a specific one, but I would probably say smaller companies that have direct relationships with the growers of coffee, where they have a much clearer view on how the coffee had been stored. So large coffee companies will have huge amounts of coffee being stored somewhere for a long time. So if storage time is much shorter, and the risk for mycotoxins is smaller, for mold is smaller. So with that, I could recommend, Mariana, that you have a look at small importers of coffee. I have a friend who does that. Let's chat offline about that. And so now another one. Ila, non-stick pan. I use non-stick pans for cooking. Please, what type of pans would you recommend? Well, there are some, probably there are two options. On the one hand, you may have heard about Le Creuset, so this French brand that does these very old school, very heavy iron pans or iron pots. And they, so this, the more old school, the better. So that might be an option. And what I personally do is I have modern pans that are made of stainless steel. So they're not coated with anything. And the interesting thing there is they are just as easily cleaned as non-stick. So I've done this for quite a few years by now. So just a regular stainless steel pot, and with pots and pans, probably the higher quality the better. So the heavier the base, the better, because that just leads the heat most evenly and avoids burning in certain areas. But that's really just my thoughts. And another question, I wash all my fruit and vegetables before chopping. Does that make a difference? Yes, definitely. I think everyone should have, no, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I think washing fruit and vegetables is always a good idea, even if they're organic, because after all, they're exposed to the same rain as everything else is. And while they may not have herbicides and pesticides having been sprayed on them, but they very likely will have been exposed to either rain or unfiltered water. So yes, washing is always a good idea. And I think that brings us to the end of questions. I'm getting incredibly cold here, probably like everybody else. Rishabh, do you have any other questions?
I think we've had loads of really good questions. So thank you everyone who did ask. I really appreciate it, and it was really insightful. I think just my 2 cents is understanding the detox pathways, how to accelerate them. Didn't think sleep would be as big an answer as it seems to be. Maybe I'll get an excuse to lie in then, or not. But no, yeah, really insightful, and thank you so much for your time. I'm sure, like everyone who joined us, really appreciate it, and we look forward to the next sort of series coming up.
Yes, thank you very much.
Awesome. All right, thank you everyone for joining, and we'll see you at the next Hive webinar.
Yes, see you soon. Bye.
Bye.